I ran my web design agency for nearly a decade, and while I grew it to be a successful business, it's fair to say that I faced a few challenges along the way, and I made my fair share of mistakes too. In this video, I'm going to share my biggest ones so that hopefully you can avoid them. Hi, thanks for joining. If you're new to this channel, I'm Rich Dean, a web designer and developer, former web agency owner, and author of the book series Start, Grow and Sell Your Web Design Agency. My goal is to help anyone looking to start, grow and sell an agency to save time, earn more money, avoid the common mistakes and pitfalls, build a thriving and valuable business. Okay, so onto my biggest web design agency failures in no particular order, starting with number one, working with friends. So there's a famous quote from John D. Rockefeller, which goes, "A friendship founded on business is better than a business founded on friendship." What this basically means is that it's far better to form friendships after you've already done business with someone than it is to form businesses with someone that you're already friends with. I'd definitely agree with that statement. And from my own personal experience, I'd also say that it's a bad idea just to work with friends. It might seem okay, and maybe when you're just starting out and you just need to get some work under your belt, it can be okay. But once you're up and running and you're running your agency as a proper business, I'd personally steer well clear of working with your friends and even your family. I tried it myself and it didn't work out. The main problem is that when you're running a business, you need to act in a certain way. And this is usually a lot different to how you can act around your friends. You need to set different boundaries. You'll need to be professional, make tough business choices, and push back if you need to. Plus, when there's money involved, that always makes things more challenging if things don't go well. I tried doing work for one of my closest friends, but it put a big strain on our friendship, and we almost fell out over it. It was hard to separate our business relationship from our friendship, and in the end, it just wasn't worth it. Our friendship was far more important. Number two, growing too quickly. This is another one that I see so many businesses doing, and it's one that I was also definitely guilty of in my early years. I think the reason this becomes a problem for so many businesses, mine included, is a combination of ego and scarcity mindset. When I first started my agency, like many new business owners, I was short of work, so I had to take whatever work I could just to get my agency off the ground. As much as I'd hate to admit it now, I definitely had a scarcity mindset, but I was also keen to make my business a success. I didn't want to fail. So I worked hard and put myself out there, and after a while, my business started to gain traction. In fact, it wasn't before long I had more work than I could handle, so I started to employ people. That then started to snowball, and we got more and more busy. That's when I made what was probably a big mistake, which was to try and grow too much too quickly. I maybe still had that scarcity mindset, so I didn't want to turn work away or let clients down. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't also caught up in the success part. It felt great that so many clients wanted to work with us, and it really felt like I'd achieved success. But the mistake I made was that growing too quickly meant things just became far too chaotic. The quality of our work suffered. I had to work long hours just to keep on top of everything. I found myself having to spend lots of time managing my team. And overall, while it was an important lesson to learn, it was also a really difficult period. But it didn't need to be that way. And the thing I learned was that it's okay to take a slower pace, turn work away, or just manage clients better so the agency can be run in a healthier, more sustainable way. Number three, bringing in the wrong people. Okay, just before we get into this one, I need to ask you a really big favour. We're a new channel, and so it would really help us a lot if you could like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and also share this content with anyone else you think could benefit from it. It takes a lot of time to make these videos, and so this will really help YouTube to recognise our content, and it will mean we can carry on making helpful videos just like this. Okay, back into it. So I learned the hard way that who you bring into your business can play just as important a role in your success as anything else. In fact, if you employ people and if you don't take your time and be really selective, it can bite you big time. When I think back to all the times that were challenging, having the wrong people was also one of the major factors in what made those situations harder. The big lesson I learned was that when you're going to employ someone, it's really important to take your time, be really selective, and don't just bring someone on because you're under some kind of pressure. Remember, that person could be with you for a long time. You'll need to manage them, and they will need to do the work to the standards that you expect. It can also be very painful and expensive to exit someone if they're not the right fit. Also, the work they do and the employee themselves will represent your business to your clients and the outside world. So take your time and only bring on people who you think can add real value to your business. Number 4, trying to grow without systems and processes. The best way that I can explain this one is to talk you through the first few months when I employed people. I started my agency as a sole freelancer, and over the years, I had also developed a very specific way that I designed and developed websites. It was kind of like my own boilerplate system, but that doesn't really matter too much. The same lesson would apply if you use an off-the-shelf system to create your websites. The point is, even though I didn't really realize it, I basically had my own system for creating websites, but it was all in my head. When I worked on different website projects, it was easy for me. I understood how my system worked intuitively because I had created it and because I used it on every project. So when I started to employ people, I thought I could just bring them on, spend a little bit of time talking them through how I did things, and then they would just better get on with it and do things the same way that I did. But I was wrong, very wrong. I was lucky with my first employee. He was brilliant and he was able to learn my system. But even then, it took him a good few months to fully understand it. Other employees struggled, but at first I didn't understand why. It took me a while to realize that the reason they were struggling was because everything about how we created websites was still in my head. It wasn't until a few months later that I read a very famous book called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael E. Gerber that I realized that I needed to get everything into systems and processes. It took a while, but as soon as we started to have everything systematized, things started to become a lot more manageable. Number 5, becoming too dependent on one client. Okay, so this one was probably the biggest and hardest lesson that I learned in the whole time I ran my agency. Again, the best way that I can explain this one is to talk you through what happened. So not long after I started my agency, when I was still working as a sole freelancer, I was introduced to a bigger, more established design agency. They were more of a traditional agency, so things like branding, print design, and marketing. They did do a lot of website projects, but they didn't have their own web team in-house. So when we met, it worked really well. They were looking to outsource a lot of their website projects, and I picked up some steady work, which was a godsend when I was just starting out. In fact, it worked so well that a year later, I started renting a desk in their office. That helped even more. Because I was more visible, they started passing even more work my way. I was also starting to get more work from my own sources, so it wasn't long until I started employing my own team. Over the following year, the agency started passing us more and more work, but that was when I started to realise that it was becoming a big risk for my business. I think at one point, around 90% of our work was coming from that agency. I'm sure I don't need to remind you of the old saying about not putting all your eggs in one basket. I started to realise that having all our work coming from just one source was far too risky. I was employing around half a dozen people by then, so I realised that if that agency pulled the plug, I would be in a very difficult position. Well, that's kind of what happened. The other agency basically decided that they wanted to start employing their own in-house web team, which was completely understandable. We were still a separate business to theirs, and so we needed to charge them our standard rates. But for them, employing their own team would be more cost effective. So we decided to part ways, and I moved my business away from theirs. But this wasn't an easy thing to do. In fact, it was one of the most difficult situations I ever had to overcome. So much of our work was coming from that agency that it took us a while to build our own pipeline. So I had to make some really difficult choices, including reducing the size of our team, which was really hard to do. It was a hard lesson to learn, but an important one. And so from then on, I made sure my business was structured so that we only worked with lots of smaller clients. I never let us become dependent on one big client ever again. Okay, so hopefully you found this video useful, and I hope it will help you avoid some of the mistakes that I made. If you've enjoyed it, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you'd like more tips and insights for how to grow your business, check out my book series, Start, Grow and Sell Your Web Design Agency, which you can buy from Amazon now, and I'll share a link in the description below. And if you'd like to watch even more informative content, then why not check out this video here. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.